What's up guys, my name is Ace, and Season 2 for Battlefield 6 is right around the corner. It is coming this upcoming Tuesday on February 17th. And today we're going to be going through the patch notes, and I wanted to pick out what I consider to be the most important things in these patch notes as they relate to the multiplayer side of things. Keep in mind, there are so many other things that are listed here. The patch notes are incredibly long, but the vast majority of items in the patch notes are just like edge case fixes or like UI fixes, things that you probably would never even notice. And therefore, as I was going through, I just picked out the things that I feel are actually noticeable and things that will have an impact on your game-to-game or moment-to-moment experience while playing the game. And so let's dive right into this with how they're handling recoil compensation. They are making an adjustment here, and they mentioned that in some cases the amount of aim input required to counter recoil didn't always reliably match the recoil that was being applied, and that could make weapons feel harder to control than expected. They said they did make some improvements to this in Season 1 to reduce some of the most extreme cases, but there was still some inconsistency, and therefore with this update, they're aiming to take care of a lot of that inconsistency as well. So with this fix, it's not that they're changing the recoil itself, they're just changing how it feels to compensate and counteract that recoil. In addition to that though, they did also mention they will be making a broad recoil tuning pass across automatic weapons, because they noticed the balance was starting to drift between weapons that were meant to have high damage with hard to control recoil versus lighter weapons that are trading raw power for ease of use and consistency with recoil. And they do cover some more details later on when we get to the weapon section. And of course, next week when we actually get the update, I do plan on having a very detailed before and after side-by-side comparison. I'll be redoing all of my recoil plots so you guys can see exactly what changed here. But next, let's get into the player section, and this is the area I really had to pick through because there were so many little edge case fixes and stuff, so I tried focusing on the things you'll notice the most. And the first thing here is they adjusted the acceleration curve of slide and jumps to better account for players' speed when entering a slide or jump, so things should just be a little bit more smooth when it comes to that acceleration. On top of that, they improved first person, and they also mentioned later third person ladder animations for entering, climbing, and exiting a ladder. So that should be a little bit less janky than it currently is. Sometimes the animations look very strange on ladders. Then, outside of just jumping and sliding, they've also improved predictability and consistency of player movement with new acceleration curves instead of linear accelerations. And they say these updated accelerations retain responsive movement while allowing for micro adjustments of movement and ensure other players' movement looks more correct to improve the quality and predictability of gunfights. And on paper, at least, I'm really liking the sounds of this. It should feel a lot more responsive if they don't have those linear accelerations. And I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on the update to see how this feels in particular. On top of that, they also made animation and logic improvements to vaulting over medium-sized obstacles, so they refined the momentum and smooth transitions into movement. Then after that, they reduced the intensity of hit reactions while on fire to improve visual clarity during combat. So if you do catch on fire, it sounds like you're going to be able to see things a little bit better and still fight back well on fire. I just hope they don't overtune this to the point where you don't even realize you're on fire, of course. And then finally, for the important things I picked out for the player section, they mentioned they're reducing the maximum slide impulse length by 25% to improve balance and readability during fast movement. So it does appear they are nerfing the slide. And I'm curious to end up seeing what this feels like from the player's perspective, as well as what it looks like from a third-person perspective. Because I know from that third-person perspective, it can be very difficult to track at times when somebody slides, especially in close quarters. And that movement can sometimes feel very superhuman and unrealistic. And I realize it's not a milsim, but there's a balance to be found there. And it looks like they're just going to be tuning things to get it a little bit more in the direction of being more realistic and more trackable. But then after that, they have a section on vehicles, and some of the highlights on this are, first up, they disabled angle-based damage mitigation on the Traverser Mark II to better reflect its lighter armor profile. So that means it'll now deal a consistent amount of damage from all directions, and therefore it is going to be easier to take those out. On top of that, they're fixing an issue where the tank turret aiming speeds would differ between first-person and third-person zoom views, and that is of course nice to see that that'll feel a lot more consistent now. And then finally, for the more important changes here that you'll probably notice if you use vehicles a lot, is you'll no longer be able to move vehicles forward or backward when you have the big map open. And this is just to prevent input conflicts with map zoom controls on controllers. So I'm curious to see if this change only applies to controllers or if they're keeping it consistent across inputs, just to be fair to everybody, I guess. That's pretty much it for the important section from vehicles. And it's important to point out, it looks like that flight radar is not coming with this update. And that's something they've been mentioning for months now. And many people are very eagerly awaiting that. It doesn't appear to be happening with the Season 2 update, at least. Next up, when it comes to gadgets, they fixed an issue where the RPG-7 and the MBT Law launchers would be inaccurate if you fired them right after the zoom transition is completed. So the moment you get fully aimed down sight, if you're trying to like quick scope with these, they weren't going to be accurate as they should have been. They also fixed an issue where the smoke grenade was missing from support class loadout 2. Then for the laser designator, they fixed an issue where it would prioritize already painted targets instead of the vehicle that you were actually aiming at and trying to paint. That obviously sounds frustrating. For the repair tool, they fixed an issue where it wouldn't repair vehicles if you were targeting the glass components on the vehicles. Then they improved the consistency when destroying anti-tank mines and the slam AV mines with explosives. And that's actually something I've noticed quite a bit, where I'd try to blow one of those mines up, and even though my explosive would land like right next to it, it sometimes just wouldn't blow them up, and therefore I'd have to swap over to my gun to shoot them. And that just felt really awkward and kind of frustrating to deal with. And then finally, something I'm really excited to see since I play support a lot, they'll be improving the consistency of the defibrillators when used on stairs and uneven terrain. And this is excellent because there's still so many situations where somebody is just in a weird spot where I can't revive him because he's on some stairs or there's just some weird terrain. And no matter how many times I try, I just can't get the defibs to work. So that's it for the gadget section. Now let's move on to weapons. And as I said, I'm going to be going through these in much greater detail once we actually get the patch, so I can test pre-patch versus post-patch and show you guys exactly what it looks like. But I still want to do at least kind of rush through this section today so we get an outline of what's going to be changing. And the first thing is targeting something that many of us really don't like in the game. They're adjusting the in-world spotting range when firing a weapon without a suppressor or flash hider. So that diamond that appears above your head when you fire your gun, if you're not using a suppressor or flash hider, they're reducing the range of that from 75 meters down to 54 meters. And then on top of that, they're adjusting the minimap spotting range when using a suppressor by increasing it from 15 meters up to 21 meters. So anybody within 21 meters of you will see you showing up on the minimap when you fire with a suppressor. So they're nerfing suppressors, but also somewhat nerfing that in-world spotting. At the end of the day, well, it's nice to see that they're at least looking at this. I don't think this is the right call. I think that in-world spotting just needs to go entirely. Reducing that from 75 meters down to 54 meters, that's not really going to get me to use muzzle brakes any more often than I currently do. And then nerfing suppressors, I don't think is necessary if they just get rid of that in-world spotting in the first place. Like, I get it. I'm sure they're seeing tons and tons of people using suppressors and they want to reduce that usage. In my eyes, nerfing suppressors isn't the best way to do that. And instead, getting rid of that in-world spotting would have a much bigger impact on encouraging people to branch away from suppressors. So I do feel this doesn't really get at the root of the issue as well as it could. And the issue with nerfing suppressors here is that means they're also nerfing the stealth playstyle, which is going to have the effect of homogenizing playstyles more and leading to less playstyle variety in the game, in my opinion at least. I think we should have the option to have a really solid, powerful, stealthy playstyle, but there should be trade-offs involved with that. And those trade-offs should be, if you're selecting something like a muzzle brake, you shouldn't feel like you're being punished super hard for doing so, and instead you should feel quite rewarded by seeing very noticeably improved recoil compared to using a suppressor and trying to be stealthy. So I'm personally not a big fan of the direction they decided to go with that. Next, they're fixing an issue where locked weapon skins could be used in the firing range. And that seems very unnecessary. If it's just being used in the firing range, what's wrong with letting people see what that weapon bundle actually looks like in your hands and what the attachments on it actually feel like when you're in the firing range? If anything, I feel like that would help push bundle sales. But looks like they're going to be preventing us from doing that. Next, it looks like they're going to be adjusting the cost of the 5mm green laser on the DRS IAR. Then they're fixing inconsistent knife melee timings to improve reliability during close quarters combat. After that, they're fixing the LMR-27's fast 15 and 20 round mags, as they weren't actually improving the reload times as intended. As for the Mini Scout, it's going to be seeing a couple nerfs here. They're going to be reducing the muzzle velocity from 880 down to 800 meters per second, and they're going to be reducing the limb damage to better align with lower torso damage values. As for the rangefinder, they're updating this, so the custom zeroing will not apply instantly anymore, and there will be a short delay before that custom zeroing takes effect. And I believe this is to target the situation where you can map your custom zeroing to the firing button. So as you fire your shot, it zeroes the scope before the shot is fired, and therefore you literally just never have to consciously zero your scope. And anything to make the rangefinder less appealing is good news in my eyes. I think that has really done damage to sniping in Battlefield, and I wish it weren't there in the first place, but hey, anything they can do to at least make it less appealing, that's good news to me. Now, after that, they outlined a bunch of the recoil changes that I mentioned earlier. Again, I'm going to be retesting all of the recoil and showing you guys before and after. But just as a basic overview, it appears they're reducing recoil, or at least improving recoil effectiveness on the B36, L85, M433, and SOAR 556 in the assault rifle category. For LMGs, they're improving recoil on the L110 and the M123K. For carbines, they're improving recoil on the M277, M417, QBZ192, and the SOAR 300C. For the SMGs, the PW7 and USG90 will be seeing reduced recoil. And then for the AK-205, they just said they adjusted recoil behavior to better match expectations for its caliber. But I don't know if that means an increase or a decrease to recoil. So that one's kind of up in the air, but we'll see once we actually get the updates. And then when it comes to guns that they're actually increasing recoil on, for the SMGs, it's the PW5, SGX, and SCW10. I think that's definitely appropriate to see some recoil nerfs to those. And also the SG553R is going to be seeing increased recoil as well. But finally, for weapon adjustments here, for the DB12, they're going to be increasing the rate of fire. And for the LMR27, they're going to be increasing the damage at close to mid ranges to better reward accurate headshots. So it looks like quite a few weapon adjustments, but primarily just recoil adjustments and then the odd miscellaneous change here or there. I am looking forward to seeing just how much of an impact all of these changes are going to be having though. Next, for game mode adjustments, they're going to be adding Rush to Myrick Valley. Then they're also going to be adding the Scout Helicopter to the following maps and modes. For Conquest, we have Manhattan Bridge, Operation Firestorm, New Sobeck City, and Myrick Valley. And for Escalation, they're going to be adding it to Manhattan Bridge, Eastwood, Operation Firestorm, New Sobeck City, and Myrick Valley. After that, we have Progression, and we've already kind of talked about this since they gave us a general overview. They're going to be improving our Battle Pass token earn rate through just regular XP and playing the game. Then they're fixing a bunch of issues with like re-rolling challenges, for instance, or some challenges not tracking properly. And they did also mention they're improving RedSec weapon XP and character XP, but unfortunately still no mention of any weapon XP improvements for multiplayer. And that, I think, is a major oversight. It's still one of the biggest issues in the community for many people out there. Not everybody has that issue, but I know for tons of people, this is like the #1 issue, and it wasn't addressed here at all. But then after that, for UI and HUD, they're changing the engineer icon to improve readability and make the role more clear based on community feedback. And that's nice to see they're finally making an adjustment there. Then there's also going to be a new stats screen in your player profile that's going to be a lot more in-depth, and I'm very curious to see what that ends up looking like. I think that's great to see some more expansion to that. Then for settings, they have an accessibility option coming for flash and stun grenades to turn your screen black instead of white when you get flashed. And then finally, there was just a section on audio here with a bunch of fixes and improvements coming to audio. A lot of that just has to do with audio layering and prioritization in really hectic situations where there's a lot of different audio sources playing. And I'm definitely open to as many audio improvements as we can get. And there we have it. That wraps it up for all of the highlights for multiplayer in these patch notes. As I said, there was tons and tons of other things outlined there, but most of it you'll probably never even notice. And overall, while there's definitely a solid handful of really good improvements there that I'm happy to see, at the end of the day, I just can't help but think that they're just missing so many things that we've been providing feedback on for so long. And they mentioned the reason for the delay of this season was to better address player feedback, and it just doesn't seem like that's happening, at least not at the level that many of us were really hoping for. Now, I realize things can be very complex here, and some bits of feedback do require way more time and effort to address than others, but it just seems like there were a bunch of potential easy wins here that they could have included that shouldn't have taken too much time and effort, and yet we're just not seeing it. So I think it definitely could have been better, but at the end of the day, still some nice improvements coming. I'm still looking forward to Season 2 next week, and I am curious to hear what you guys think about these patch notes in those comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.